The Source engine has gone through many changes throughout the years, being introduced in 2004 from Half-Life 2. My goal here today is to document the changes between all of them. If you'd like to skip to a specific game, go to the timestamp linked in the description below. Counter-Strike Source. The Source engine in this game was introduced way back in 2004, and because of it being the first game, the engine itself in-game has changed a ton. And I don't want to go out of my way to get a sketchy build from 2004, I will only be comparing what the game is like since its last engine update, which is around 2011. Movement. The movement in Counter-Strike Source was balanced around the Counter-Strike game formula. Being a bit slower than other games such as Half-Life, there is a noticeable momentum to the characters, ergo it takes a bit to speed up, slow down, and etc. One way to get around this, however, is by jumping. Jumping and landing, however, slows all momentum down. However, there is a bug in the game that Valve has tried to patch, and actually succeeded, named bunny hopping. Bunny hopping occurs when you jump at the frame you hit the ground. Jumping as soon as you land allows you to build up speed up to some crazy speeds. This was patched mostly in future updates, however, and is now capped to a certain degree in all future games. All Counter-Strike games change your speed depending on what weapon you're using. For instance, you'll run slower with the M4 route when compared to a knife. In Counter-Strike Source, all pistols move you at the same speed. Ragdolls in this game are much more realistic as the body has more weight. And when you move the camera around, the weapon moves with it. Frame rate. The frame rate in Counter-Strike Source is fantastic. Keep in mind this will vary in all machines, but almost anything can run this game, averaging about 300 FPS at all times, even in battles. Settings in Counter-Strike Source are fairly similar to what is in most Source games today, except for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, whereas you have the basic texture, model, and the like, but you also have the multiplayer tab, which allows you to customize your crosshair, spray, and more things hidden away in the advanced tabs. There is a strange option to choose your DX level in the video settings, however, but this only brings up DX level 9. Graphics. The graphics in Counter-Strike Source are very 2004-like, with grimy textures and all that, but as the game got updates, new graphical features were updated, such as HDR. Despite this, in my honest opinion, HDR does not look that great with a lot of Counter-Strike Source's textures, as many complaints exist of it being way too bright, and I can agree with that. The following footage you are seeing right now is taken with all the settings at max, except for motion blur. Model-wise, they don't look half bad, they hold up quite decently enough. However, the general low quality of them has become more apparent in the faces and textures and some on the camo pants. Texture-wise, as stated before, the game looks meh. Even on very high settings, the textures do not look nice when viewed at a close angle. Effects in the game are rarely seen, except for when the bomb explodes, and even then it's not that important and is thus negligible at best. For what it is, the game looks decent for being near 14 years old. Half-Life Source. Half-Life Source is a remake to the Source engine from the original Half-Life, released in 1999. As such, it's a lot different to most of the games on this video. Note, this applies to all the remakes such as Day of Defeat and Half-Life Deathmatch. Movement. The movement in the Half-Life Source, and thus all of the other games, is one of the fastest in the series. Bunny hopping in this game is quite weird. It doesn't seem to be a cap, but you can still go incredibly fast. There are things you could do to uncap the speed with injecting the game and all that fast, but I again refuse to do it. Settings. Exactly the same as Half-Life 2. Not much to say. Graphics. The game only got a Source makeover, not model updates, so the original models are still there in their 1999 glory. So, no, the graphics do not look good for today's standards. I mean, look at the faces. Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 was the first game that introduced the Source engine. Being ordered to the Counter-Strike Source, I showed that one first because of a big update that hit the game in 2007, the Orange Box update, which was basically Source 2 before Source 2 was even a thing. This had multiple changes to the engine, most of which are covered in this image from sourceruns.org. As I do not have access to the old engine, I will be comparing the new engine in this video. Movement. The movement in Half-Life 2 is extremely faster than in Counter-Strike Source. Being able to sprint is only icing on the cake. Landing after jumping will no longer slow you down as it did in CSS. And the biggest thing, bunny hopping, or accelerated back hopping. This occurs when you sprint, jump, turn around, and bunny hop backwards while crouching. This occurs because Valve tried to cap your speed while moving forward. However, since you're moving backwards, it keeps on adding speed to you, up to as fast as you can go without smacking into a wall. Settings. The settings in Half-Life 2 are extremely similar to the ones in Counter-Strike Source, so this part won't be long. Apart from there being no multiplayer option, as Half-Life 2 itself does not contain any multiplayer of the sort, so having it would be unneeded. Graphics. The graphics in Half-Life 2 are better than the ones in Counter-Strike Source, however the textures are mostly still the same, except for the floors, because they have a very nice reflective properties to them, so that's a plus I guess. Models in the game look extremely dated, even more so than in CSS, as most of the time armor covers up the faces in that game. Here, you can see all the faces in their 2004 or 7 detail. The explosions and such in the game look basically the same in Counter-Strike Source, so just take what I said from that and apply it here. They look nice. The HDR in this game is much better, as there aren't many bright textures in the game, so it doesn't scream at your eyeballs whenever you look at something that's brighter than a light bulb. Overall, the graphics in this game hold up very well. Quite well, considering its 2007 makeover of sorts. Half-Life 2 Episode 1 was released in 2006, 2 years after the original release of Half-Life 2. The game is mostly a story continuation, so not as much has changed in the engine. So, as such, this part will be in brief. The movement and settings are exactly the same in HL2, so it's not even worth covering here. Graphics. The graphics did get a bit of a touch-up. Models look better and the textures also got an update, for the most part. Trash, of course, looks like trash. Other than that, however, it's mostly just the same thing. Episode 2 is really only graphics. Really. So I'm gonna read what I have in my script here pretty quickly. So here it goes. The second episode only changes graphical. HDR looks better, that's about it. Got it? Let's move on.